LAX's busiest terminal cafe had a live comedy act in the form of the elderly server with trembling hands named Michael. Pilots had nicknamed him Turbulent Service. Flight attendant crews would giggle behind his back, and managers tried to keep him out of sight. Not a single customer would have guessed that this 68-year-old man had flown for the Air Force for 27 years, first in Vietnam, then across Europe during the Cold War, and finally in the Gulf War. That Tuesday morning, when 4 armed men attempted to hijack a flight to Chicago with 237 passengers, Michael's past and extraordinary abilities would emerge in a way no one could have expected. Welcome to Best Honor Stories. Before we continue, tell us in the comments which city in the world you're watching this video from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button to help us preserve these valuable memories. Los Angeles International Airport, or LAX, was one of the world's busiest airports, hosting approximately 87,000 passengers daily. The Sky High Café in Terminal 5 was especially busy in the morning hours, a regular stop for passengers heading to Chicago, New York, and other East Coast destinations. The cafe's longest-serving employee was Michael Davis, who had been working there as a server for 6 years. His only noticeable feature was his uncontrollably trembling hands. "Hey, Mike, how many cups of coffee do you think you can carry today without spilling?" teased Steve, a young American Airlines pilot, while having breakfast with his friends. The other pilots laughed. This was a ritual that repeated almost every morning. Michael smiled politely and said nothing. He took out his order pad with trembling hands. "I'll just have a black coffee," said Steve, "and if possible, put it in the cup this time. Not on my uniform, okay?" The other pilots and flight attendants at the table burst into laughter. Michael just nodded again and took the rest of the orders. Michael was preparing the orders at the coffee station when Melissa, the cafe manager, approached him. "Michael, you look particularly bad today," she said with concern. "Your hands are shaking more than usual. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Melissa," Michael said. "I just forgot to take my medication this morning. I'll take it when I get home." Melissa nodded. "Maybe you should help in the kitchen today," she suggested. "We're going to be very busy in the coming hours." "It's no problem," Michael said softly. "I can serve. I'll just be careful." While Michael was carrying coffee with trembling hands, 4 men were lining up at the security checkpoint at the other end of Terminal 5. All dressed in business attire, they looked like ordinary businessmen. Security officers noticed they seemed a bit tense, but who wasn't at LAX? The 4 men presented their documents. Everything looked perfect. Business travelers from Europe, connecting to a flight to Chicago. Security systems gave no warnings, and the dogs showed no reaction. The men passed through the scanning devices and entered Terminal 5. At 9:45, the 4 men entered the cafe and quietly sat at a corner table. "We have a breakfast menu," said Michael, approaching their table. He took out his pad and prepared to take notes with his trembling hands. The men looked at him carefully. One of them, the one who seemed to be the leader, said shortly, "Just 4 coffees," in accented English. Michael noticed the men were tense. This was common in airports. Some people were afraid of flying, some worried about delays, some were just uncomfortable with crowds. When Michael brought the coffees, they stopped talking. His hands were shaking so badly that one of the cups tipped over, spilling coffee on the table. "Damn it," shouted one of the men, jumping up. His jacket was soaked with coffee. "I'm so sorry, sir," said Michael, quickly grabbing napkins and trying to clean up. "I'll bring you a fresh coffee right away." "Never mind," said the man who was the leader, looking at his friend. "We're leaving anyway." The 4 men got up from the table and left the cafe. Michael apologized as he cleaned up the spilled coffee. "Again, Michael," said Melissa, sighing. "I told you not to serve today." At 10:15, the pre-boarding announcement for the Chicago flight was made. Michael was washing dishes in the kitchen when a young waitress named Zoe came in. "Hey, Mike, what are you doing in here? Did Melissa finally pull you from service?" Michael smiled slightly. "Just helping out, Zoe. It's a bit crowded today." Zoe rolled her eyes. "Yeah, especially that Chicago flight. 37 passengers, completely full. And I heard that flight is always turbulent." "Turbulent," said Michael thoughtfully. "Zoe, those 4 men at the table, were they going on the Chicago flight?" "Which men?" Zoe shrugged. "I don't know, but probably yes." There's no other major flight at this time. Michael dried his hands. I'm going to get some air, he said, and left the cafe. From the glass walls of Terminal 5, he could see the runway. A Boeing 767 for the Chicago flight was being loaded. On a sudden impulse, he began walking toward the boarding gate. When he reached the boarding gate, the process was almost complete. A line of passengers was moving toward the plane. The 4 men were at the end of the line. Upon closer inspection, Michael noticed that one of the men had a bulge under his jacket. This image triggered a distant memory in Michael's mind. Afghanistan, 2002. Militants trying to enter an airport with similarly concealed weapons. Michael first thought about going to a security officer, but the men were already moving toward the bridge. Besides, who would believe him? An old server known for his trembling hands and mixed-up orders. A moment that will change your entire life, he thought. He had been working as a server for 6 years. For 6 years, people had been laughing at his trembling hands. For 6 years, he had been trying to leave his old life behind. But some things never leave you. Michael took a deep breath and walked toward a baggage cart standing at the side. He quickly checked the baggage tags. Luggage going to Chicago. Yes, this could work. No one asked him what he was doing. At LAX, as a uniformed person, you were almost invisible. Michael pushed the cart toward the baggage bridge, and after making sure no one was watching him, left the cart and moved toward the passenger bridge. The gate agent was busy with another customer. Michael quickly entered the passenger bridge. When the men boarded the plane, Michael followed them. At the entrance to the plane, a young flight attendant stopped him. "Excuse me, sir. May I see your boarding pass?" Michael looked at her determinedly. "Flight attendant, I am not a server," he said, in a completely different tone of voice, authoritative, commanding. "I am Captain Michael Davis, Air Force, retired. Those 4 men are carrying weapons and planning to hijack this plane." The flight attendant looked shocked. "What? But you're—" "Listen," Michael said urgently. "They got them through security, probably with inside help. Inform the captain immediately." Flight attendant seemed uncertain, but Michael's suddenly changed demeanor and the authority in his voice had affected her. "Wait here," she said, and moved toward the front of the plane. Michael watched the 4 men. They were now settling in the middle section of the plane. They were taking strategic positions, 1 in the front, 2 in the middle, 1 in the back, a classic hijacking arrangement. The flight attendant returned after speaking with the captain pilot. "The captain wants to see you in the cockpit," she said, still with suspicious looks. When they entered the cockpit, the captain pilot removed his headset and turned to Michael. "Who are you and what do you want?" he asked directly. Michael took a deep breath. "I am Captain Michael Davis, Air Force, retired. I served for 27 years, was an F-16 and F-15 pilot. There are 4 men on the plane. They are carrying weapons, and they plan to hijack this plane." The captain frowned. "How can you be so sure about this?" "Because I've seen the same thing before," said Michael. "Afghanistan, 2002, a similar operation. These men are professionals." "I was," said Michael, "for 6 years. But before that I was a fighter pilot. I flew in the most challenging conditions, under enemy fire. PTSD and other issues forced me into retirement. The medications make my hands shake." The second pilot in the cockpit was looking at the security camera footage. "Captain," he said with concern, "those 4 men really are acting strange. They keep getting up and changing positions." The captain thought for a moment. "Contact security," he told the second pilot. "Report the situation and ask for instructions." "What do you suggest?" asked the captain. Michael thought quickly. "Don't take the plane off the runway. Delay it under the pretext of a technical problem. Inform the tower. Wait until special security teams arrive." The captain nodded and opened the announcement system. "Dear passengers, we are experiencing a minor technical issue. Takeoff will be delayed for a short time. Please remain in your seats and wait patiently." At that moment, the second pilot had established communication with security teams. "Captain, a special SWAT team is on the way, but it will take at least 15 minutes for them to arrive." Just then, a scream was heard from the middle section of the plane. On the camera footage, one of the men could be seen standing up and pulling out a weapon. "It's starting," said Michael. "Captain, we need to do something to protect the passengers." The captain turned to the second pilot. Lock the cockpit door. Follow protocols. Michael looked at the captain. I can go and stall them, he said. They only know me as a server. That's very dangerous, said the captain. What can you do against armed men? Michael smiled slightly. I wasn't just a pilot, Captain. I was also specially trained Air Force personnel. I received training in hostage rescue and counter-terrorism. The captain looked at Michael's trembling hands. But your hands, it's because of the medications, said Michael. When I stop taking the medications for mental clarity, the trembling decreases. Indeed, Michael's hands were now shaking less. Adrenaline and focus were suppressing the side effects of the medications. All right, said the captain, but be careful. Stall them until the SWAT team arrives. Michael left the cockpit. When he reached the front of the plane, one of the men was standing, showing his weapon. The other three were still sitting, but clearly ready and waiting. Everyone stay calm, the armed man was shouting in accented English. This is a takeover. Nobody move. Passengers were in panic. Some were screaming, some cowering in their seats in fear. Michael straightened his server uniform and walked forward with determined steps. Hey, you, he called out to get the man's attention. Yes, you with the gun, the man whose coffee I spilled. The armed man turned to Michael in surprise. You, server. Yes, I'm Server Michael, he said in a calm voice, and I think there's a problem here. The armed man pointed his gun at Michael. Back off, old man, or I'll shoot you. Michael raised his hands. They were still slightly trembling, but now much more controlled. Look, I just want to talk. What do you want? Maybe I can help. We want to enter the cockpit, said the man. We'll tell the pilots to take the plane where we want. Look, gentlemen, said Michael, raising his voice for all passengers to hear. I don't know what your issue is, but you're endangering 37 innocent people. You don't have to do this. Shut up, old man, shouted the leader. You're just a server. You don't understand. Michael suddenly smiled. That's where you're wrong, friend, he said, his voice completely changing. I am Captain Michael Davis, United States Air Force, retired. During my 27 years of service, I flew in 3 wars, and I can tell you this plane isn't going anywhere. The armed man hesitated for a moment, and that moment of hesitation was all Michael needed. With a quick movement, he swung his arm toward the man's gun-holding hand and grabbed the weapon. Years of training and instinct had kicked in. The movement was so swift, so precise, that it took everyone by surprise. The hijacker's eyes widened in shock as his wrist was suddenly caught in an iron grip that belied the trembling hands everyone knew. In one fluid motion, Michael twisted the man's arm, applying pressure to a specific nerve point that sent a shooting pain up the attacker's arm. As they struggled for the gun, the other 3 men were preparing to take action, but Michael had signaled to the flight attendants who were ready. Everyone get down, Michael shouted as he wrestled with the leader, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone used to being obeyed in life-or-death situations. 2 flight attendants pushed service carts toward the other 2 men who were trying to pull out weapons. With the impact of the carts, the men lost their balance and fell. The sound of metal hitting bodies and surprised shouts filled the cabin as the would-be hijackers were caught off guard. The 4th man began running from the back of the plane toward the front, but a passenger, a former college football player, stuck out his foot to stop him. The man fell flat on his face with a loud thud, his concealed weapon skidding across the floor. Michael continued his struggle with the leader. Despite his age, years of military training and discipline still kept him in shape. With a series of quick movements that looked almost choreographed, he twisted the man's wrist in a way that made holding the gun impossible. The weapon fell into Michael's waiting hand. "Don't move," he shouted, pointing the gun at the man, his stance immediately shifting to a perfect shooting position, feet planted firmly, arms extended with surprising steadiness. "Everyone stay where you are." 15 minutes later, the LAX SWAT team entered the plane and took the 4 suspects into custody. FBI agents arrived and took Michael aside for questioning. "Mr. Davis, how did you know these men wanted to hijack the plane?" an agent asked. Michael calmly explained. Their behavior in the cafe, the concealed weapons, their strategic seating arrangement. Years of training and experience had given him the ability to notice suspicious behavior. "And you are a server?" asked the agent, finding it hard to believe. "Yes," said Michael, "but before that I was an Air Force pilot for 27 years. I served from Vietnam to the Gulf War. PTSD and other health issues forced me into retirement. The FBI agent made several phone calls to verify Michael's military background. Everything checked out. Michael Davis was indeed a respected Air Force pilot who had received multiple medals. The plane was evacuated, and the passengers were taken back to the terminal. Pilots who had previously laughed at his trembling hands were now bowing respectfully before him. "Captain Davis," said Steve, the young pilot who had mocked Michael that morning. I'm sorry. I didn't know." "No problem, son," said Michael, smiling slightly. "How could you have known?" At Sky High Café in Terminal 5, Melissa and the other employees were shocked after hearing what had happened. When Michael returned to the cafe after finishing his interview with the FBI, everyone greeted him with applause. "Michael," said Melissa, her eyes filled with tears, "you never told us." Michael shrugged. "There was nothing to tell. I was just trying to do my job. But we treated you so badly. We made fun of your trembling hands. It's because of the medications," Michael said simply. "PTSD, nerve damage, remnants of Vietnam and subsequent missions." A week later, Michael had an unexpected visitor. A middle-aged, well-dressed man came to the cafe with two soldiers. "Captain Davis," said the man, approaching Michael. "I'm General Roberts from the Pentagon. We've heard everything about the events at LAX. You showed extraordinary courage and skill. We're starting a consulting program at the Pentagon for retired military personnel, specifically in airport security and hijacking prevention. I'm offering you a position as a consultant in this program." Michael thought for a moment. For the past 6 years he had hidden himself, tried to leave his old life behind, but perhaps it was time to pass on years of experience and knowledge to others. "I'll think about it, General," he finally said. "I'll let you know as soon as possible." That evening, Michael sat at home looking at an old box containing medals and awards he had earned throughout his career. He picked up a photo, a picture of himself as a young pilot, standing next to his first F-16. He took out his phone and dialed the number on the general's business card. "General Roberts," he said when the phone was answered. "This is Michael Davis. I accept your offer." 2 weeks later, Michael was spending his last day at Sky High Café. His coworkers had thrown him a small farewell party. The cake said, "Farewell to our hero server." "I'm not a hero," said Michael, as always. "I was just someone who was in the right place at the right time and knew what to do." "No, Michael," said Melissa, her eyes filled with tears. "You are a hero in every sense of the word. We just needed a hijacking attempt to see it." As Michael Davis left LAX, he no longer carried a secret. He was no longer just the server with shaky hands, but a respected veteran. And perhaps, he thought with a smile, it didn't matter that his hands continued to shake, because now people knew the story behind those trembling hands. Now I ask you, have you ever known someone like Michael Davis? Someone who appeared ordinary, perhaps someone you belittled, but who actually had an extraordinary past and abilities? Share in the comments, because these stories need to be remembered. These people need to be honored. Thank you for watching Best Honor Stories. If this story touched you, share it, subscribe, and help these silent heroes' voices continue to be heard. We'll see you in the next story.